Hey everybody, it's Angie and welcome to Hot and Flashy. In today's video, I was going to share my experience going on a Rick Steves tour.
Bonjour madame.
Bonjour. Everyone sees the landmark?
I took a Rick Steves tour to France a couple of weeks ago, and when I was talking about it in other videos, I said, hey, if you guys are interested in a Rick Steves kind of review video, what it was like, I would be happy to do that. And there were actually two videos that people were interested in. One was just the Rick Steves experience, what I thought of it. And then the other video was about how to pack carry-on, because of course on a Rick Steves type trip, they highly encourage you to pack carry-on only. Now that isn't the kind of content I normally have here on Hot and Flashy. If you're new here, hi, welcome. I'm Angie. My channel is normally a beauty channel for mature women. I'm 63 and I'm really into skincare, makeup, hair care, fashion, lifestyle. So if you're interested in that kind of content in general, definitely subscribe to my channel. Would love to have you join the Hot and Flashy fam. I should probably start this video by saying that I'm a little biased against tour group trips. You know, I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with them because I'm used to independent traveling. I like independent traveling. I never would have considered going on a tour like this. But the way it came about is a friend of mine wanted to travel. And so she and another friend invited me to go on a Rick Steves trip to Germany a couple of years ago. And I said, absolutely not. Don't want to travel like that. You guys go ahead. Have a great time. They came back. They said they loved it. And she said to me, look, would you just please go on one? And if you absolutely hate it, I'll never ask you to go on another one. But if you like it, we could do this every couple of years and we could see the world together. And I was like, that doesn't sound like a bad proposition. Okay, you're on. I'll go on the Rick Steves trip and we'll see how I like it. All right, let's start with general pros and cons of this kind of tourist group travel versus independent travel. And then I'll tell you more about my specific trip. So one of the pros that I hear people mention a lot is that all the work is done for you. And this is the thing that my friend really loves about these trips the most. You know, I'm the opposite. I love trip planning. So if you're someone who loves trip planning, then it's probably not going to be for you. But if you're someone who's like, Jesus, take the wheel, you know, when you want somebody else to do all the planning and tell you where you're staying and where you're going every day and what time you're getting up in the morning, then that is definitely an advantage to these trips. You basically look through the trips that are available. You kind of check out the general itinerary. You go, oh yeah, I'd like to see those things or go to that area. Here's the dates that work for me. Those fit in my schedule. Bam, here's your money. And the trip is all planned. That ended up being a pro for me on this trip. I'm not sure I love it for every trip that I ever take, but for me, this worked out great because, you know, I got to take a trip to France and I didn't have to plan it. And if I had had to plan it, I probably wouldn't have gone on a trip to France this year at all. The con side of everything being done for you is if you're the type of person like me who really likes to plan everything out and you really like to be in control of what you're doing, you don't have any control about what you're doing, when you're doing it, you know, to a certain degree. Like I like to pick the kinds of hotels I'm staying in. I like to decide what I want to see in any city or destination and then be able to do those things on my own schedule. Your schedule is not your own, except for the blocks of free time that they give you. Another really awesome perk of these trips is that there's a built-in tour guide who is with you 24/7. They're there via phone. If you have an emergency, there's someone that you can call or text. And if you're a uneasy traveler, having a tour guide is going to be so comforting for you. Our dedicated tour guide, Linda, she was great, such a wealth of knowledge. She showed us what kind of bank to take out money at so that you are not a target. She showed us who were the pickpockets on the subway. She taught us to ride the subway. So just a wealth of knowledge, very friendly. Another little pro related to the tour guides, our tour guides didn't walk around with a sign or an umbrella over their head. What they had instead were what she called the whisper system. So it's basically a little transmitter that the tour guide has, and then you just wear a little box around your neck with a little earpiece. And you can be wandering around looking at different things. You can go sit down, but you can keep listening. You don't have to stand there like in a group with your tour guide. I know you're gonna be shocked to hear that there actually is a con of having a dedicated tour guide, but there was one. For me, is that sometimes we would be standing outside an attraction that we were gonna go to, and she would be telling us the history of the attraction and everything there was about it. And it would just get a little bit too long. Like at one spot, I think she told us stuff about it for an hour. It was like 50 degrees out. It was an overcast day. It was windy. It was cold. I just wanted to get on with it and just like go inside, see the thing, and get a move on. Another pro/con is that you have the opportunity to meet new people and potentially make new friends. So I got to say, on our tour, everyone was lovely. They were all a great bunch of people. There wasn't anyone who was like super, loud or obnoxious or whatever. But, that can happen. You're in a group with 28 other people, and there may be someone there who you just don't like or you just don't get along with, but then you're stuck being semi-near that person for the rest of the trip. Another one is that you get to visit places that you might not normally go to, places that you had no idea even existed, or they're there, but you wouldn't make a side trip to see it. But there you are seeing it, and you're like, wow, this place is amazing. I would have missed this if I had planned this trip on my own. But also, you could spend some time at something that you think is a total waste of time, or you don't like it, or, it's just not your cup of tea. And that did happen on our trip with a couple of the things. I would have passed on them, but, you're locked in. You can't really have a lot of flexibility on that kind of trip. Another pro is that tickets to all the attractions are included, at least on Rick Steves, in the price that you pay up front. Since you're with a group, you also often don't have to wait in that big long line to get the tickets and then get in the second line to gain entry to the attraction. It's a pro from the standpoint that they do all that. The con is that don't wait to check your agenda, okay, to see what's included and what's not, and don't assume things are included because they might not be. For example, the Eiffel Tower was not part of our trip. 2 weeks before the trip, I finally looked at the itinerary and was like, what? We're not going to see the Eiffel Tower? So, I texted the gals and said, hey, you guys want to go see the Eiffel Tower? I'll get tickets. And by then, all the Eiffel Tower going up in it tickets were sold out. Don't assume that you're going to see anything. Definitely check your itinerary to see what you're going to and what's included. All right, the next one was a real pro for me because I'm an active person and I knew I wasn't going to have time to be like working out on this trip, but on the Rick Steves trips, there is a ton of walking. There's a ton of stair climbing. There's a ton of uneven terrain walking. It's nice on the Rick Steves website. They actually give you a little chart of how active the trip is. And this one was like 3/4 of the way into active. I checked my step meter when I got home. The least we ever walked was 4 miles. The most we walked in one day, 8 miles. I felt like I was getting my exercise and my steps in every day and going up and down stairs. But if you're not able or that's too many, then that could be a con for you. The next pro is that quite a few meals are provided for you. If you are not the kind of person who likes to walk from restaurant to restaurant trying to figure out where you're going to eat, then these trips could really work into your lifestyle. Breakfast was provided every single day. It was in the lobby of every hotel. It was very consistent. No matter what you wanted, they pretty much had it. They had a hot breakfast, eggs, sausage, bacon, cappuccino, espresso, and they have tea out for the tea drinkers. They had fruit, they had yogurt, granola. There weren't a lot of lunches included. We did have a lot of group dinners together, so that's a night that you don't have to think about dinner. I'd say 50% of the nights we had group dinners. The guide would hand out a check-off sheet in the morning where you would have 2 choices for your appetizer, 2 choices for your entree, 2 choices for your dessert. You would pick one of each, and that's what you would eat that night. And the final thing I have on the pros list is that it forces you to pack light to go on a trip like this. You're dragging your bag 5 blocks from where the bus drops you off to the hotel. You're carrying it up 2 or 3 flights of stairs in a hotel that doesn't have an elevator. The cons related to that is that, of course, you don't get to bring all the clothes that you want. You don't get to bring all the shoes you want. You don't get to bring all the hair stuff, all the makeup. You don't have a lot of room in your suitcase to bring home souvenirs. It forces you to have to do laundry once during the trip, which if you don't want to have to do any laundry, then packing carry-on is not necessarily going to be for you. These are all the things that you have to weigh out to decide if this is going to be a trip that you are going to enjoy or not. It didn't make it unenjoyable for me. I did wear things over and over and over again. I did do laundry once in the middle of the trip. It wasn't a deal breaker for me. Is it how I love to travel? No. I have some extra cons here. One of the cons is if you are a solo traveler and you want a single room, there is an upcharge for that. Mine was $925 extra. And I think that for the price I paid, some of the hotels were not great. You know, the tour guide did say that she tries to keep it even, but with a big group like this, like every hotel, someone's going to get a less than ideal room, you know, with the parking lot view or the air conditioner view, and someone will get a nice room. And she tries to rotate it around. So I did have a couple of really solid, decent rooms in good hotels. I had a couple of really, really subpar rooms that are not places that I would ever want to stay in. And I understand, like, we went to some out of the way places, and so you're not going to get like a 5-star hotel, which is not what I was expecting, but I also wasn't expecting it to be so bare bones either. I mean, it was fine. You know, I slept, it was comfortable-ish. Another con, of course, is limited free time. Over the 11 days, we had 4 free afternoons. We had no free mornings. When I'm on vacation, I want to sleep in some days. I don't want to have to get up and like be on the bus at 8:30 in the morning every single day. You're changing hotels every 1 to 2 nights. So every morning or every other morning, you're packing your bag up and leaving. Another thing that I definitely consider a con is the time spent on the bus. It's you and your 28 compatriots on and off this bus every day. Some days you spend an hour on the bus. Some days you're on and off the bus. Some days you're on it for 4 hours. Never solid though, because they do have, you know, laws in place where the bus driver has to stop and rest every hour and a half to 2 hours. So, you know, sometimes we would find a rest stop. What they try to do is build in an attraction for you to go see on the way from one place to another. So that gives you your stop where you go see something, have a little lunch, get back in the bus. I would say I probably spent 23 hours on that bus. That's a full day. The bus itself was very comfortable. The driver was great. You have a dedicated driver who's with you everywhere. The thing I'll say about the bus that really, really bugged me, besides just the time on the bus, is that a couple people got sick. Like the first person starts coughing, and then the next day there's 3 people coughing, and the next day you can't get away from the coughing on the bus. It's like, ugh. We are like a little petri dish sitting here. I masked up and I kept my mask on anytime we were on the bus. I didn't get sick. The time on the bus was probably my least favorite thing about the trip. All right, so those were all the pros and cons. I hope that list helps you to get a good idea of what the trip is like. This part will give you a better idea of what this particular trip was like. So our itinerary for the trip was that we had the 3 nights in Paris. We arrived a day early. We booked into the same hotel so we didn't have to move. And then we were just there before the trip started. So that was the day that we went to the Eiffel Tower. We went to the Arc de Triomphe. Those 2 attractions, which are 2 of the biggest attractions that people want to see in Paris, were not included in our trip. We had lunch at an outdoor cafe. We did a little bit of shopping. The first day of the trip, we met at 5 p.m. in the hotel lobby in our little breakfast room to do the getting to know you meeting with everybody. Then we went on a walking tour of the neighborhood around where our hotel was. We walked around the corner to a restaurant where we all had dinner together, and that was our first day. So on our first full day on the trip, we got up early, had our breakfast downstairs, and then I think we all had to meet at 9 o'clock outside the hotel with our whisper system, and we were taking the subway over to Ile de la Cité, which is where Notre Dame is. So she gave us our tickets to Notre Dame. We all went inside. Then after we came out, we had a meeting place. She gave us basically the history of the Notre Dame Cathedral, which took, I'd say, about a half an hour of being standing out there. And then we walked a couple blocks over to Sainte-Chapelle, which has all this beautiful stained glass in it. And that's where we stood in that courtyard for what felt like an hour while she told us the history of that. The afternoon that day was free, so then the 3 of us went to lunch. We went to see a few sites that we were interested in, so we rode the subway back to our hotel. And then that night, my friend wanted to go to this specific bar that was not in our neighborhood. We took the subway there, and we found a restaurant on the way home. We did Uber back, though, because it was getting kind of late. Day 3 was another walking tour of Paris, where we had to be up and out early. We took the subway again. We walked around a couple of neighborhoods with a different tour guide who was like a history buff and told us about a lot of the historical things that had happened in this neighborhood and how it had changed over the years. We were walking around those neighborhoods for 3.5 hours. Some of it was interesting. Some of it, meh. We wound around and eventually ended up at the Louvre, and then our afternoon was spent at the Louvre Museum. And then after you got out of the Louvre, then you were free to do whatever you want for that afternoon. We sat in a cafe for lunch, and then we walked back from the Louvre up to the Champs-Élysées so that we could do some shopping. I went to Sephora. So that was kind of the end of our time in Paris. We had to get our bags packed that night because in the morning we would only have time for breakfast, and then we all had to gather to get on the bus to leave Paris. We were on our way to a town called Bourges, but it's pretty far, so halfway they found a little attraction, which is like a chateau that's being built modern day, but it's being built using all the old ways of doing it, so they had like a forge and a blacksmith. It was an interesting stop. Again, is this something that I would have wanted to make a side trip to see? No. We got back on the bus. We went to this town called Bourges, which was fantastic. I loved Bourges. We were only there one night. I wish we could have stayed 2 nights. They had a beautiful cathedral, which of course we saw. That night we had a group dinner. It's market day the next day. You would have to find your own lunch and bring it with you on the bus. So, we all get up early, we pack our bags, we walk down to this market, beautiful, fresh, gorgeous fruits, vegetables, fish, shellfish, meat, like anything you could want. So we left Bourges. We were headed towards the Loire Valley to a town called Amboise, but on the way there we stopped at a winery, this beautiful chateau where we had a wine tasting. Then we could sit outside and have a little picnic lunch with the food that we brought. Then it was back on the bus, and then we had about an hour drive to go to another chateau. This one is called Chambord, and oh my gosh, just driving up to this place, I happened to sit in the front seat of the bus, and it was the best view of this massive chateau that was actually designed to look like an entire town, even though it was just one house, I use loosely, but it was beautiful and stunning. She sets you free to go in. She gives you amount of time that you're going to be in there and says be back at the bus at X amount of time. Would not have gone to see this on my own, but so happy that I went to see it. We hop back in the bus, we go to the new hotel, and we have a group dinner that night. So we went to see another chateau the next day, so we had to be on the bus early again. I think it was like 8:45, 8:30. And then we were going to see a ladies' chateau, and this one was fascinating. I loved everything about it. It was so gorgeous. The setting, stunning. And we all gathered while our tour guide told us all about the chateau, everything you would ever want to know about the history of the chateau, everybody who lived there, who was in love with who couldn't make a baby with who was so-and-so's mistress, like all the dirty details. And then after she's done telling us everything, then she releases you to go into the chateau, then you're on your own to wander around, and then, you have a time that you have to be back on the bus. So we had a free afternoon, but our tour guide gave us the option of going to see the Leonardo da Vinci house because he actually lived in France for the last few years of his life. Wow, what a fascinating human that is, so many inventions and everything, the art. Just crazy, that mind. Whoa. That night, I think we had dinner on our own. Then the next day, we were packing up and leaving there and heading to Brittany. And we got on the bus and we were going to Mont Saint-Michel. This is another place that I never would have gone to on my own that was so worth it, that I'm so happy I was on this tour so that I could go see this amazing place. It's definitely a bucket list thing to see. So yes. So cool. It's this little tidal island and the tide comes in around it. So during certain times of the day, you can walk out to it like on the beach, and other times of the day, it's surrounded by water. And there's just one causeway that goes up to it. It's basically like this little rock that a monastery was built on top of it. Most of the tours don't have you stay there. There's hotels back on kind of the mainland, but with Rick Steves, you stay on Mont Saint-Michel, which I didn't realize was a big deal, but actually is. So we felt pretty special about that. It was an amazing day. It was an amazing sight to see. I gotta say, that was my absolute worst hotel room. It was literally like a monk's cell. So we got to Mont Saint-Michel kind of late in the day. We had the afternoon free to go and explore after we got into our rooms. We did that. Then we had a group dinner, and that was nice. And then we slept there. And then that morning, we had a guided tour of the rest of Mont Saint-Michel, including the monastery on top, which was just mind-blowing and fantastic and wonderful. But that was one of the days that we did the most walking with the most steps with the highest elevation. And so then we hopped back on the bus in the morning, I think around 11:30, and then we were going to our next town, which is called Bayeux. We stayed there 2 nights. Our hotel was right on the main street in this beautiful little town with little shopping and stuff. Our tour guide had said, listen, if you want to do any shopping in this great little town, then this afternoon is the time to do it because the stores all close at 7 and we leave early in the morning. So this afternoon is your chance. But we do have a walking tour scheduled. So if you want to opt out of the walking tour and go shopping instead, do that. So we were very happy that she told us about that. So that's what we decided to do. So we shopped around the little stores. Then my friends went back to the hotel and I said, I'm just going to walk up to the cathedral and just see what the cathedral's about. And as it turns out, the walking tour was in the cathedral. So I rejoined the group. The girls and I went to dinner that night. Then the next day was our trip to Normandy. This is another day that we had a separate tour guide who came and joined us. This guy was a Normandy expert. He really brought it to life. He took us to 4 different locations, told us 4 different stories of D-Day. It was like seeing an epic movie on the course of the day. They did provide lunch for us that day because we moved around to 4 different locations, so it was on and off the bus, about an hour or 2 in each place. It was a very draining day. When we got back to the hotel, we went out to dinner. The next day, we had to get up early again because we were leaving that hotel. This time, we were hopping on the bus and we were going to Monet's Gardens in Giverny. And this was another magical moment on the trip. This was so fantastic, so beautiful. The way they keep those gardens, it literally looks like a Monet painting. And like one of the high points of the trip were that the young couple on our trip got engaged there. That was really romantic and lovely. So we spent a half day there. We got lunch at a cafe and we had the bus ride back to Paris. We stayed at a different hotel than our original hotel in a different neighborhood, which was great. I'd say we got back to Paris around 4. That gave us a couple hours to do a little shopping, but then we did have another group dinner that night, our big farewell dinner, which was lovely. The last day of the trip was just get up and make your way to the airport and leave. So here's what was included in my Rick Steves trip. The meals that were included were all breakfasts. We got 5 group dinners and I believe 1 lunch was also included. All the specialty guides were included in the original price. All of the tips are included, so you don't have to tip the driver or any of the tour guides or any of the hotel people. All the attraction tickets that they take you to are included. We had a subway pass that was included that was good for 10 rides. There were occasional treats and snacks, like our tour guide would always have a little box of candies or a little box of macaroons. It's not the kind of travel that I love to do. It's not the kind of trip that I want to take for every single trip I go on. But, my friends, they want to go on one like every other year. And I think I would be down for it. I think for the most part, there were so many amazing experiences on this trip that are things that I never would have gone and done on my own. And they outweighed the time on the bus. In 5 years, when I look back on the trip, I'm not going to remember that there were people coughing on the bus. I'm going to remember the sunset at Mont Saint-Michel. And I'm going to remember the rain falling in Monet's Gardens, and I'm going to remember that beautiful chateau. The mistake I made on this trip is that I didn't look at the itinerary until it was too close to the trip. So I think I would, book the trip, look at the itinerary, decide which things I want to do, which things I really didn't want to do, and then maybe adjust it a little bit in between. So that's my wrap up of my Rick Steves trip in a nutshell. I know it was a long nutshell, but if you're trying to decide if that's for you, I wanted to give you a lot of detail and a lot of information about what it's really like. And so I hope I've given you enough information here today to help you make a decision on if that kind of travel is going to be right for you. If you've taken a Rick Steves trip or if you have another tour company that you recommend, would definitely love to hear about that in the comments below. That is everything for today's video. So if you found it helpful and informative, go ahead and give it a like. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel. As always, I thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate your watching. I hope you have a great day and I will see you in the next video. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.